Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and what I wanted to do today was actually talk a little bit about bombers and helping you try and pick out the right one that's best for your situation. Now, before we get too far into this, it's always important to talk about things and say, kind of disclaimers along the lines of there is no best ship, period, for a role. Now, there's going to be ones that may fit you better, but let's kind of run through some of the pros and cons of three of the primary bombers in this game, and those are going to be the Gladiator, the Retaliator, and the Vanguard Harbinger. So starting out with the Gladiator, some of the things that it has going for it is it's going to be a ship that handles similarly to a heavy fighter. It looks a lot like a Hornet, it flies a lot like a Hornet, though it is a little bit slower and less agile. You do get the second seat for turret support and shield management, meaning that your co-pilot can kind of help, lay down cover fire. They can also manage your shields, they can switch around the power, those types of things, and that's going to help you stay a little bit more effective as you're going in. Now, being a smaller option, there are some benefits there that I think we need to talk about. One is the ability that you can dock and rearm on most carriers since it is about Hornet sized, and we know those are going to fit, on Idris's and on like Javelins and on, Bengals and those sorts of things. So the ship has a little bit of extra versatility and the ability to land and get repairs and rearm and refuel. Now, another thing that you can kind of do with the Gladiator is that it can really be converted into more of a missile boat versus a torpedo. And the reason we're not talking about the Freelancer Miss is because I put that in the more missile boat category. It doesn't have the ability to equip torpedoes, at least as far as we can tell, unless maybe you get some ability to mount some, like a small one on the wing. But for the most part, it's really more focused on the missile aspect of the game. Now, getting back to the smaller part of the Gladiator, you also get additional benefits like a smaller signature. It's going to be harder to see a Gladiator coming to do damage than something like the big Retaliator. Now, there are some definite kind of negatives to the Gladiator. With it being a carrier-based fighter and it's not having an interior, it should be a lower or a smaller ranged ship. You're not going to be able to go extreme distances to do your bombing. The other two options are going to be better in that regard. Now, there are a couple mentions about the Gladiator being kind of converted into an explorer of sorts. And if that does end up being the case, we may see a little bit difference as far as how the range plays out. But my hunch says that if you're going to be able to go long range and really do exploring in a Gladiator, it's probably going to be at the sacrifice of some of your torpedoes. For example, potentially getting rid of torpedoes and adding on extended fuel tanks, those types of things. The Gladiator is also a relatively slow ship, so it really kind of suffers from the potential of being overwhelmed by interceptors. If somebody knows you're coming and they can send some light fighters after you, you may be overwhelmed and have a hard time actually ending up delivering your payload. Now, up next is the biggest of the three, and that's going to be the Retaliator. And one of the big pros here is that it does carry the biggest payload possible, which is going to make it more effective at actually killing cap ships. When we compare that to ships like the Gladiator and the Harbinger, their payload is smaller. A clear sky torpedo, the big-ass torpedo, it's about twice as wide in diameter as we see on what we expect to see on the Harbinger, I should say. So the just pure payload of what you can drop off is very, very significant. You carry 4 of those in the front bomb bay, you carry 2 of those in the back. You can do a lot of damage. You also get something here that I almost consider to be a positive and a negative. You get really great turret coverage on the Retaliator. You've got 3 turrets on the top, 2 turrets on the bottom, and what that does is it means it's a harder target to be overwhelmed. You can lay down almost suppressing fire on your way in to help keep other targets at bay while you're really going towards what you're trying to kill with the torpedoes. That becomes a little bit of a negative because since you have 5 turrets there, there's going to be a lot of operational costs that are associated with that, specifically in crew cost. So, it's kind of a give and take there, but if you're going for the biggest target, then the Retaliator is going to be the biggest bang for the buck. Now, you'll also get and this is kind of branching off a little bit from the true purpose here, but the Retaliator has a real nice option and versatility because it's got the modules where you can swap out the bomb base for different things. So, for example, you could potentially end up throwing the dropship module up front and put in the bomb module in the back, and then you've got a ship that's capable of blowing a hole in the side of something and then landing inside that hole and dropping off the Marines that you've got available to you. So there's different things you can do with the Retaliator that you just can't do on the other ships, and that versatility is something I always value when making recommendations on ships. Now, with 5 turrets, it does also give you the benefit of giving you a large crew if you want that. There's a lot of people that want to play with friends and want to kind of multi-crew a ship, and on a ship like this, we're seeing a pilot plus 5 turrets, meaning you've got a minimum of 6 spots available. There's also going to be a shield management spot in there as well, so you're up to 7. So there's a lot of different things and different jobs people can take if you want to get everybody onto one ship and have a good time together. The Retaliator is also known to be the UEE's long-range bomber. It's the kind of the tried and true, the big dog that's capable of going long ranges and dealing pain long behind enemy lines. So that's a nice benefit that it has available. And with it being the biggest of these 3 ships, it also has bigger shields and should get more armor, and that's something that's going to be a work in progress. But ultimately what that means is you're going to have more hit points, a larger durability with the ship, meaning that survivability is a really nice option. That comes with a problem too, getting to operating costs. If it's a big ship and you're capable of taking a lot of damage, damage is something that ends up needing to be repaired. And when you repair your damage, it's going to cost. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, there's some cons that go along with the Retaliator, and my biggest one, and this is the hugest turnoff of this ship for me, is the fact that there's no pilot-controlled weaponry outside of the missiles. So you are incredibly dependent on the proficiency of your gunners that are actually going to be arming your, or I guess sitting in your turrets. And that also means that you can choose to not bring them along, but you can't attack anything in front of you without throwing a torpedo at them. And that's a really expensive way of dealing with like a fighter or something like that that's smaller, that's pestering you. With that, we talked about the higher crew size, and with it being a bigger ship. So not only are you going to be spending more on your crew costs, but you're also going to be spending more on things really simple like fuel. And also when you consider the fact that you're carrying the biggest torpedoes possible, that also means that those are going to be the most expensive torpedoes possible. So every single one of those that you throw out the bottom of your ship is going to have a big price tag, and we're already seeing that a little bit with missiles. Missiles are really expensive to purchase. A torpedo is going to be really expensive to purchase. The Retaliator is also a really big target. It should be pretty easy to see coming and easy to come in and try and intercept as long as they have the crew available to come and try and attack you. Stealthiness is something that could be a definite benefit because when you think about a torpedo attack or a bombing raid, ideally you want to be stealthy, you want to be sneaky. You don't want people to know you're coming because then they can set up defenses against you. And a big target does provide a situation to where you're going to have a harder time sneaking up. And the last thing I want to say about the Retaliator is, with it being the biggest of these 3 options, it's similar to Constellation sized. It's likely going to be unable to use the smallest jump points. So while you could always get to the same location, it may end up taking you a longer route to get to where you want to go. Whereas something like the Vanguard or the Gladiator should be able to get through every single jump point in the game, meaning you can take the most efficient route possible. Now, the Harbinger is a really interesting ship. It's essentially the Gladiator Warden with the Battlefield Upgrade Kit, basically meaning that you've got a slightly different set of weaponry, and that interior module is really focused on dropping torpedoes at the bottom of your ship. Now, the Harbinger is a long-range ship. We know that about the Vanguard. It's made to be durable, it's got the redundant systems, it's got a good range, and what that means is you could get to the edge of a system to deal with maybe like pirates that are kind of hiding out at the end, without too much strain. Or on the flip side of that, you could also be a pirate that is living out on the edge of the system, knowing that you're going to have less hassles from law enforcement, and fly yourself into the center of the system, be able to do damage there, and flee all the way back to your safe place without too much concern. Now, a huge benefit to the Harbinger, and I think this is probably the biggest one for me, well, this and the next one, is that the Harbinger is going to be the fastest of all of these in cruise mode. And when you have a fast ship, and there's a cross-sectional scanning aspect to this too. And the front of a Harbinger, or the Vanguards in general, is pretty thin. And what that means is it's going to be harder to pick you up. And if you're coming in really, really fast in cruise mode, that also means that it's going to be harder for people to deploy their ships, deploy their fighters to try and intercept you. And even if they do get out there, you're going so fast it's going to be hard to land any shots to really stop what you're doing, meaning that you probably don't really need an escort when you're running a Harbinger. Now, the other aspect here that I really like about the Harbinger is that in my mind it has by far the best forward-facing weaponry of any of the ships in this category, including a rocket turret up top. So not only are you able to really do a lot of damage to the ship that you're going to attack and hopefully bring down their shields before you launch out your missiles or your torpedoes, that means that you're going to be able to have the most effective payload delivery system possible. And the rocket turrets are going to just be adding to that, because we know the dumbfire rockets that we see on the Delta are pretty powerful, especially when the shields are down. And another thing about the Harbinger that's pretty nice is it's a Vanguard. It's a Vanguard at heart. And while it may not be nimble, it may not be the most, breakdanceable, capable ship, it does handle like a heavy fighter. And that's something that's helpful, especially if you are intercepted before you get to your target. You can probably do at least a little bit of damage or get yourself out of the sticky situation without having to overcommit. The biggest issues I have with the Harbinger is that it actually has the smallest payload of the three, with only 3 torpedoes. Now, it may end up being bigger than what a Gladiator can carry, but we're really just kind of looking at imagery right now and trying to kind of infer based on that. The stats pages tend to be a little bit outdated. I think we all know that. And in addition to that, what we start to see is going to be issues with what's a missile, what's a torpedo, how are those classified, and we're not really sure. But based on what we can see, it's very clear that the Harbinger carries torpedoes. And they appear to be about half the size of what the Retaliator has. But you do only get 3 of them, so they really need to count. And if there's effective ways to counteract or kind of protect yourself from torpedoes, you don't have a lot of shots to actually end up making that happen. And my other issue with the Harbinger is it's the most expensive option out of all 3 of these ships. Now, you do get the nice benefit that the Harbinger can do a lot more things. It's more of a heavy fighter that's capable, or kind of a heavy... It's not really a brawler. It's more of just like a... I don't know how to describe it. It just packs a punch on whatever you're attacking, and it also happens to have the torpedoes. Because even without the torpedoes, you still have the quad rack up front with the, or not the quad rack, the quad laser platform up front, plus the size 5 capable nose gun, which I think we're going to see a rail gun there, plus the rocket turret up top. The amount of weapons on this ship is incredible, and I think that's going to play really well into just attack roles in general. It's almost like a Redeemer in a gunboat capacity. So the fact that you can carry the torpedoes, in my mind, is a nice benefit. But when you're purely talking about bombers, I think that's something you need to keep in mind, is the fact that you've only got 3 of those, so you better make them count. So hopefully that helps you guys out. There's a lot of factors that you need to consider. There's not a best one of these. There's just a best one for each situation. And I think knowing how you want to play ahead of time and kind of taking some of these factors into account is going to help you make the right decision. So if you have questions about any of these, please let me know. If you guys have opinions of your own, please get them in the comments. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.